Thank you, Ian. And thank you for all the previous panelists and people that have been making this event a very successful one. My name is Jesus Morales Sanchez. I am one of the advocacy managers with T1 International. I have been living with type 1 diabetes for almost 3 years, and I'm really happy to introduce this set of really awesome advocates that we have with us today. So first off, I would love to introduce Brandon. So if we can get Brandon Denson on the screen.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You see me? I'm not sure if you guys can see me or not. Okay.
Yep, we can see you.
Hey, how you doing? How's everybody doing today? My name is Brandon A. Denson. I am a type 1 diabetic. I was diagnosed 17 years ago. Oh man, so long ago. Seems like it was just yesterday. But yeah, I'm an advocate, the face of diabetes, and then I also run a nonprofit by the name of Bolus Maximus with my co-founder Matthew Artero. And you know, our goal and our mission is to support, educate, and motivate. And you know, I think one of the biggest things that we see often is people having to ration insulin or not having access to insulin. And then we also see in underprivileged, underserved, under-resourced areas, they don't get the same attention as if we're talking about a Beverly Hills or we're talking about somewhere in Hollywood or something like that. So, you know, far as what we're doing, and my goal is to make sure I advocate for everyone living with diabetes, and especially type 1 diabetes.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. I'm really happy that you're joining us today. Up next, Alzahrra.
Hi, my name is Alzahrra. I am a type 1 diabetic. I've been diabetic for almost 15 years now. I got it back in 2007. My brother is also a type 1 diabetic. He got it a few years after me. I'm also a software engineer, so that's kind of what I do. And I've been volunteering with T1 Diabetes for like 2 to 3 years now. I don't know, don't quote me on that. But yeah, my like main goal is to honestly like use technology to hopefully provide access to underprivileged communities. That's me.
All right, thank you, Alzahrra. Up next, Mariana Marquez.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, my name is Mariana Marquez Farmer, and I've been living with type 1 diabetes now for 22 years. First generation, also the only one in both my paternal and maternal family to be a type 1 diabetic, which has definitely caused a lot of interesting conversation within my families. I am located in Colorado Springs, where I'm a family advocate, helping marginalized societies with policies, with helping them find support within our community. I am a digital advocate for T1 International, along with my diabetic alert dog, Lady Bear. I'm sure you guys have seen her. And I've been doing this for 1.5 years. And my main goal is to really bring a spotlight within my culture about what type 1 diabetes is and what that looks like.
All right. Thank you, Mariana. And then last but most certainly not least, Tracy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Ramey. I first got started in diabetes advocacy when my daughter, Cassidy, was diagnosed in 2018. It became like almost like a rallying cry for me, kind of standing on a soapbox, shouting to the internet, like, hey, this is happening. And I didn't think anyone else was listening. But then I got a call to action with the Ohio chapter, where I became the communities of color outreach lead. Within that time, I also developed type 2 myself. And I also have learned that from the experience of my daughter having type 1, it is just so important to, like, within a healthcare setting, to understand that like you're not always receiving the care you need as a type 2, but because my daughter has had type 1, I understand intricacies, and I understand the fact that insulin should be for all.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. And I think we're here to have a really comprehensive and an initial conversation of a more comprehensive topic. We have learned throughout the day that healthcare and access to healthcare is very different for different communities, depending on what country you're from. However, being all of us based in the United States, I think that a lot of those inequities can also be seen within the same country, and the United States is one that has a very interesting dynamic. We see a lot of different communities struggling in different ways. So I would definitely want us to get started just really getting a little bit of insight from each one of you about what are some of the barriers to access to healthcare that either you or people in your community have experienced, and the impact that they have had. So I don't know if there's any volunteers that wants to go first, but yeah, floor is yours.
I can kick it off. So for me, I am a first generation. My parents are refugees from Iraq. They came here like in the 90s. So when they came here, my dad had started high school, but he didn't even end up finishing. And my mom was like almost done with college. Wait, so my dad's older, but like he never got to finish high school because of having to go to the war. Basically, they're from Iraq, so you know, the Iraq war. And of course, like coming here, it was already hard enough, you know, like having that language barrier and like not having really, starting from literally nothing, having to build up, caused a lot of barriers. And then like a few years later, I came along and got diabetes, and it was really hard because people didn't really, I guess, understand the way that like, I guess they automatically assumed that my mom was just like incompetent because like she has an accent, and like when she speaks, she's like, I guess she's like, she is hard to understand and her English is kind of broken, but like also at the same time, like it's not her first language. And it just seemed like a lot of the time when a lot of our like diabetes educators or our like doctors and stuff, when they would see us like in the hospital or even like going to like follow-ups, a lot of the times they kind of just like they never gave us information about like insulin pumps, CGMs. That was kind of all me finding out about it from like doing research. Otherwise, no one has ever brought it up to that point. So it just seems like they were just trying to like get rid of us in a way, like, you know, just giving us like the essentials and then being like, all right, like you have insulin, you have syringes, like figure it out type thing. And a lot of the times, like it was kind of like me having to advocate for myself, and I was only 8 years old. And we just would go to all these appointments, and like my mom, she understands, like she is able to talk, but like they would literally try to like dumb it down for her almost, which is like insulting because you're automatically assuming that like someone doesn't understand. And then also like diabetes was not, especially type 1 diabetes in children, like I was the first person to get it, and like no one understood it in the community. So like there was so much like misconceptions about it, and we just had a lot of people like automatically assume it's like what I ate, what I did, and like people in her community or in our culture like have no chill, so they will literally say anything that comes to mind. And like, yeah, so just having to figure all of that out, and then also coming from a low income family, that didn't help because access to like all these high tech like technologies were basically inaccessible for me. So dealing with that was a lot.
Thank you, Alzahrra. Would anyone else like to add to? Yeah, Brandon.
I'll say from the very beginning, which it seems like it was, like I said, yesterday, when I was diagnosed, going into my senior year of high school. Just to follow up what she said, I think there isn't a lot of doctors, endocrinologists, nurses. They don't really talk to the patients about the next greatest things that could potentially help somebody living with diabetes, whether that's a form of insulin, if that's a form of technology, far as CGM, far as insulin pumps. I know when I was at the University of Michigan Hospital, I just happened to ask. I was like, it's got to be an easier way than just like drawing up a syringe out of the vial and like taking a shot. And then that's when I first found out about an insulin pump. So it kind of, I was always into technology. So the first chance I had to get on an insulin pump was something that I wanted to do, especially with being in college and then playing sports and things like that. But I think one of the things is there's a difference between education and knowledge. And I think the education piece is just books. We're talking books, but I think specific cultures need they need knowledge on how to use it as it pertains to their culture. And I think that's something huge within the health inequalities that we deal with every single day. Not just myself, but millions of other people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And I think we have to kind of change the narrative of what that looks like, because at the end of the day, if these devices, we're talking insulin, we're talking technology, if these things help individuals in different neighborhoods or different demographics, everybody should have access to them to have a better, healthy, sustaining life.
Thank you. Mariana or Tracy, I would like to give you the opportunity to add.
Do you want to go, Tracy, or do you want me to go?
I can go. As a parent, fortunately, in my situation, I think because I'm the person that is doing the advocacy for my child, I've been able to be up on a lot of the technology and all the different things that she would need for herself. It's just having that support to have access, having the support for her within her classroom, and within, like, unfortunately, she's been in the same place and the children have grown and learned with her. We've had a nurse that has done education every single year in the classroom about diabetes, and it's not contagious, and like all these different things. They have like props in that come in with that. My thing is the people that are in my community that have not been supported all this time. I've got messages from people that I've known that I had no idea that their child or they have had diabetes for years, and they're like, thanks for speaking up, thanks for doing this, and that. It's just hard within the Black community, I believe, because going back to the previous, one of the previous presentations about stigma, diabetes in itself is such a stigma, no matter what type it is. People don't understand the terminologies. And I just think that that is something that our focus should definitely go into. And as it pertains to healthcare as well, we have a lot of times where, just like Alzahrra said, that there are those biases that medical professionals have, and they're just trying to scoot you along. Like I said, I'm fortunate for several different reasons, but also with my medical insurance, I have access to healthcare, and I've been able to use that for my daughter. And I'm just thinking that other people who are lower income, who may be in the Black community, may also not have that access or the ability, or may not think that visits regularly are not as important, and are just kind of getting by.
Thank you. Mariana?
Yeah, just to touch back on Alzahrra and like my barriers and my family's barriers particularly, is that, being first generation, being the only one diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it was interesting to see how my brother and myself, who grew up here, had to be the translators. I grew up in I grew up basically in a border city. So you would expect, and you would hope, that they'd be more Hispanic, Spanish-speaking endocrinologists, but that wasn't the case. A lot of them would migrate from San Diego down to my hometown. So a lot of it was really me trying to translate these very specific words that was hard as a 12-year-old to understand and how to translate it. So I think it's very important as a strategy for myself is to educate individuals in my family what these words mean and what they look like. What is A1C? what is bolus? What is basal rate? Which for many of us, we understand that. But a lot of our immediate family, especially in my culture, it's kind of like, what does that mean? And I saw a lot of you talked about how special remedies. I mean, I can't even put into words how that impacted my life growing up as a type 1 diabetic, or what we call a bruja, which is like a witch in Spanish. But basically, it's the belief that somebody has put this spell on you, or this something that this is why you're a type 1 diabetic, and having to go to a bruja to try to cleanse you from that. My mom tried that, because like I said, it was helplessness. It was just being helpless, not knowing exactly what there was and not getting answers for it. So that's like one of the strategies that I use within my own immediate family, is just education. What does that look like? What are these terms? How can we support you? So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for going there, because I think that leads very nicely into the follow-up kind of like conversation, which is like, what are some of the things that would be helpful? We know that this stigma, there's stigma everywhere, whether it is about like people's backgrounds or the condition itself, right? And it can be seen within medical professionals, within our communities, and the role of someone who is either a caretaker or a patient, a lot of the times is taking on that advocate role, right? Self-advocate, or advocate for the person they're taking care of. What are some tools that you have found helpful to try to approach those conversations, those difficult conversations sometimes? And what are some things that you wish that either people in your community or healthcare providers would know or would do better?
Can I start? Is that okay with you all if I could start this? Perfect. I think for me is when I come into a conversation with somebody in my community, is really knowing that they're not speaking. Well, for me, they're not speaking out of hate, but out of ignorance. So that has really helped me translate and really helped me speak on behalf of a type 1 diabetic in my community. So that's one thing that I definitely push for, is just really understanding that individuals are not coming from part of hate, just really just not understanding what it is, especially if you come from a marginalized society. And I think that, what was the third question, Jesus?
What are some things that you think that either our communities or healthcare providers could do better?
Yeah. And for that, it really is just listening to us. I think T1 International really speaks on that behalf, is that the patient is the best advocate, and the patient knows what type 1 diabetes is regarding their body and their mental health. So that's one thing that I'm super I advocate for, is that, hey, I've been living with this for 22 years. I think I understand to an extent. I just need you to come alongside me and really help me understand like the medical perspective from it.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead. And I think when we look at the doctors, and I never want to discredit doctors. They went to school, kudos, but I think you hit it on the head, Marina. It comes to a point that we understand what we're living with and what we're dealing with, and I think the doctors need to listen to the patient, because we are our own best advocate. So we need to make sure, in the primary care physician setting, in the endocrinologist setting, in the ophthalmologist setting, in the podiatry setting, that these doctors are taking what we're saying seriously, because a lot of times they don't. It's like they just want to get off what they need to get off because they have a certain amount of time that they can see us. With telehealth, I think in my personal opinion, I think it's trash. That's just me. Because now we go from a 30-minute appointment to a 15-minute appointment. And it's just like, what all can be done in 15 minutes, let alone 30 not being enough time. So I think we have to get to a point to where the doctors are actually listening to the patients, because I don't think anybody will lie in there and say, hey, I'm feeling this way, but you're really not. Like, you feel terrible, but you're trying to display that and let your endocrinologist know that there's something going on, or you don't feel right. And, sometimes a lot of times what I get is it's based off of their education on what they've been taught, and not based on the feeling of the patient. And it just goes back to the listening aspect, which I feel like we can't expect the doctors to change anything if they're not going to listen to the person that they're actually trying to take care of. So we see this over and over again, whether, it's people that understand diabetes, or even if they don't, as a patient, I think it's that doctor's sole job is to make sure that they're listening to their patient.
Tracy?
Yeah, I would just say to piggyback off of that, a recent experience that we had. My daughter has a bit of insulin resistance, and she has had through the pandemic, with children in general have had some have had some anxiety. She's had a bit of anxiety with kind of dealing with the pandemic and diabetes and school and everything. And our doctor, or a new nurse practitioner, actually, I just wanted her to kind of understand like the care of her body, and kind of, instead of rattling off all these different things that she's doing wrong in her diabetes, like, you need to eat this at this time, even though she was addressing me, it was my daughter internalized that, and I had to do um a lot of just really loving on her and expressing to her that you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're doing things right. um and your body is fine the way that it is, and we're working to help you stay safe and to stay alive. And I think that doctors need to kind of understand, and I feel like she kind of talked over her, not talked over her, but talked to me and not really to her. But I feel like that needs to be something that I would really love to see more um, nurse practitioners and doctors do, is to really involve my child, who was the one going through the diabetes, the type 1, in any sense, to really involve her in that care and not kind of talk to her, because my main concern down the road is eating disorders or anything like that. I don't want that to materialize because she's feeling like she's doing something wrong in her own body.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think just a little bit of a segue, I think that that's something that, in formative years is such an important thing to tackle and talk about, right? Thank you for that. Alzahrra, I don't know if you want to add a little bit more to this.
Yes, I definitely do. So I've been like reading the chat, and I agree with everybody about especially like having access to like telehealth, because it is so annoying having to drive like 30, 45 minutes, even an hour to get like 10 minutes of a doctor's time. And then especially like for parents who, like for me, who don't really understand the language, it's almost like they drive 45 minutes for an A1C test, and then it's like, all right, like either you're doing fine or like make changes, And I feel like that does limit access, because a lot of people who live really far from like their nearest endocrinologist are just not going to be able to make those drives out, and like they tend to miss more appointments. So I definitely think that it's important for people to have access to things like telehealth. And then another thing that I've like noticed is where was I going with this? Oh, I feel like a lot of the times you're not really being educated, you're just being told to like make changes, or this is what you need to do. Sometimes they don't like even take the time to explain kind of why, or like what the relationship of like changing like what it's going to do for you almost. And then it's hard to like translate that also like to my mom or whatever, because I'm like, I'm not even understanding. This was like when I was first diagnosed, like obviously now I'm like fine, but like, I mean, parents who are just finding out their child got diabetes, like that's traumatic for them too. And then not even being able to like get the information they need because doctors don't want to take the time, I guess, to like educate parents about it, especially when it's hard to communicate with those parents. Like they're more likely to just kind of dismiss them and like go on with their days. So I definitely feel like we need more options for like healthcare. And then also I think it's really important to just have like more than just doctors. Like I find like having a diabetes educator because for a while we had to see a diabetes educator, and I found that to be more helpful than even my doctor's appointments, especially in the beginning of being diagnosed. I think it's just like really helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And then I guess, we're coming, close to the end of our session, but I definitely want, like, to have like one last bit of a conversation, which is kind of like how, has this, all these experiences living with diabetes, taking care of someone else living with diabetes, how has this informed your advocacy? How has this impacted the way that you view the work that we're doing? You're all in one way or another, connected with T1 International, and the work that we're doing. And so how is it that your lived experience has shaped the advocate that you are today?
Can I just real quick add one more important
Oh,
thing?
yeah, go ahead.
Kind of reminded me of it in the chat. Another thing, because I think it was you, Mariana, who said you have to drive 2 hours for your endo. Okay, that's another thing. A lot of these like low income marginalized communities do not have, like, I don't know if you live in, like, obviously, and I'm just saying, like, in general, that's kind of like the thing where like a lot of like low income neighborhoods and like marginalized communities don't even have, like, don't have hospitals like near them, or even like, let alone like an endocrinologist. So they do have to drive out further. So that's another reason why like it's so important to have options. Like, I mean, telehealth is like the only one I can think of. Like, I feel like I've gotten more out of my telehealth appointments that I have like actually going in, because you get like more individualized time too, and they're not kind of running from place to place. But yeah, I think that's like another thing to consider when people are making like, I guess, decisions on diabetes treatment.
Thank you, Alzahrra. But yeah, just to recapitulate with the previous question, how has your lived experience like informed your advocacy? So yeah, definitely would love to hear your thoughts. And
I'll jump in first. I think it's helped my advocacy because I was 17 years old. I didn't meet my first type 1 diabetic until I was about 20. I had the opportunity to go to Michigan State University. I played football at Michigan State University, and a kid that wrote me a letter, and I'm still in contact with him to this day. He was 13 at the time. But what it made me realize is, after reading the letter, him saying that I saved a couple touchdowns, go beat Ohio State the next week, like, it made me feel good inside, but it made me realize how important it was for me in the platform that I was on to speak out about this, which at that time, like I said, 3 years in, I didn't know how important it was to speak about it. And, I thank him to this day for writing me that letter, Nate Bob. He's actually a CDCS now. So it's cool to see like that transition of you kind of mentoring somebody when they were younger, and then also actually really feeling how powerful it is for you to use your voice and advocate, not just for yourself, but millions of other people living with this disease. Like I said, that's like a family of mine that was away from home when I was at Michigan State, when I attended Michigan State University. And it just made me, like I said, it made me realize like, this is way bigger than me, so how can I not talk about these issues? How can I not talk about these things, the trials and the tribulations of living with diabetes? Because there are a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, I think this community is very important. And then I'll take it even a step further. My reason for coming I live in California. I moved here about a year and a half ago, and I moved to San Diego. And I know one of the first things that I did is when I touched down, I got in contact with Lauren Figg, and she's extremely awesome. And, I told her that I want to jump in more on the advocacy side to kind of push and change the narrative of what the health inequalities look like, because I think we know what they look like, but it's like, how do we change them? And I think by having these panels that we have on here with these lovely panelists today, and I think just continue to talk about these issues, but not just talk about them, actually bring them to light. So people have to see how far removed it is from your suburban neighborhoods to your underserved resourced areas, or under resourced, because at the end of the day, nobody should have to struggle living with this disease. Nobody should have to struggle on getting access to insulin, getting access to the technology, which essentially helps you live your best life with diabetes. But number one, no one should ever have to fight. We already fight every single day living with diabetes. So no one should have to fight to stay alive from not having insulin, in my opinion.
Yeah, I need that on a shirt right now. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Mariana, Alzahrra, Tracy. Yep.
So I mean, just like Brandon, like totally agree with everything that's spot on. I think the way it like how advocacy and just living with type 1 diabetes has really shaped my life is that it really has impacted my career choices. It's impacted my field of study. It's impacted everything I do in my life, whether that be pursuing law degree for human rights law, because I have this passion to be an advocate, to be a voice, where I'm at right now, being an advocate for families and what that looks like. And also understanding that when I come against barriers, whether it be accommodations that are granted to me through the ADA via my work or my school, and I have to fight, knowing that in those moments of despair and just not having hope, reminding myself that everything that I do, I look back and I know there's going to be a kid or another type 1 diabetic who is going to prosper because of my fight. So that's how advocacy has really shifted my life in 360, where I wanted to be a teacher. Now I want to go into law, where I'm looking at policies. So I think that's amazing. And I mean, T1 International has really helped me get there in regards to like, how does that work within our social media, which I think is amazing. It's a good and bad thing. As we all know, there's good about social media and there's bad about social media. But right now the good is that I have individuals in my life, like everyone here, who support me, who can talk to me, and who can really just connect with me in those moments of despair and just lost hope, and realizing that that's not the case, that we're doing great work and we're moving forward, and each step is a step forward, regardless of how small or how big. So
thank you. Alzahrra, Tracy.
Yeah, so good points, Mariana and Brandon. Like, I completely agree with everything. I think, like, for me, it's really hard because, like, I think that people have a lot of like misconceptions about diabetes, like we've already talked about, and it's really hard to like, I mean, do kind of having diabetes is frustrating, and sometimes you're like educating yourself, but then also having people kind of tell you like what's best for you can be really, even like, it just adds so much more stress. So where was I going with this? Wait, can you repeat the question? Because I'm like
Yes, sure. How has your lived experience and what we have talked throughout this panel influenced and informed your advocacy and the work that you've been doing?
Oh yeah, okay. So I wanted to join T1 International, sorry. I wanted to like be part of it because of like the fact that I felt like I didn't have an advocate, like ever. I was kind of my like own advocate, and like I had my mom, but in terms of like diabetes, it was kind of us learning everything on our own. And I feel like because I just like really wanted a community, because I feel like I've learned so much more from like other diabetics than I have from even like my doctors or like my nurses. Like, I spend so much time just like on Google and like reading through like people who are diabetic, like forums of like what people have done, and usually like what they have to say just helps me so much more because they get it. So that's like advocacy is so important to me, because I hope like one day it makes someone else's life a lot easier.
Absolutely, thank you. And then Tracy.
For me, as you guys have all said, I agree with all of you and I appreciate all of your voices. I am not alone on my T1D soapbox anymore. I'm not shouting to the world by myself. I have all of you to bounce ideas off of and to understand from, and to just kind of know that I'm not alone with this very isolated thing. And for my daughter, trying to make sure that as she grows and she sees me advocating for her and she advocates for herself over the summer, we did some direct action, and she's out there holding up signs herself. And she's like, this is for me, for the time I not your insurance, or if anything could happen in your life, you're able to advocate and take care of yourself, just to empower her and to see her be able to talk to other people, other children, and to be able to help others that are that I can meet online and in other communities. So that's what it means.
Thank you, Tracy. And I think, I mean, just to kind of like close our conversation today, I think that one of the most powerful themes that has come up in our conversation has been really the fostering a sense of community, fostering the sense of unity. And I think we live in a time that allows for that to happen, and we're living it right now, right? We're in this space. It's not only all, five of us, math, but it's like all the different people that are like right now also in this Zoom call, in this webinar. And yeah, so it is incredible what a sense of community can accomplish for our advocates, for patients, for people who are struggling day to day. And when we come up together and when we come together, we are capable of doing incredible things. So I want to thank you all so much for being part of the panel. It's been amazing to have you all. And I have mentioned this to a couple of you, I mean, I think all of you are aware of this, but for the folks also in the call, we do have a bit of an update, because this has been a conversation that T1 International has had for a while. Last year, we had a similar panel. And as we grow and we continue to learn from the experiences of our advocates, we are also pushing for change within. A few weeks ago, T1 International proudly announced the creation of our Communities of Color working group, which is aiming to build, it's building on our longstanding Communities of Color campaign and taking one step forward, making sure that we're creating goals because we want to be as open, as inclusive, diverse, to the point that it reflects the real diabetes community that is out there in our communities in the world. These spaces for advocates who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and hopefully it will allow for important conversations like today's, and plans of action about the work and the impact that T1 International is going to be doing on historically excluded and marginalized communities. So this group is going to be open for any BIPOC advocate that would like to become involved. And if you're more interested in if you are interested in being part of it and you want more information, feel free to email me at jmoralessanchez@t1international.com. I'll put it in the chat in a little bit. Tracy is already part of the working group, but definitely I look forward to creating and building community with a lot more advocates. So thank you again. Thank you so much, Brandon, Alzahrra, Mariana, Tracy. As always, you have been amazing, and I'm very grateful to be in this space and in community with you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. You did amazing.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.